Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are and what you're up to, what time of day you might be listening and or watching this. Welcome back to another Speak Loud podcast. It's been a couple of weeks. We recently had our summer vacation with our kiddos. We had a phenomenal time. We took them on a cruise. We have done both. We've done cruises, we've done all-inclusives, and this year we decided to go on another cruise, and we chose Royal Caribbean. This was our first Royal Caribbean, and I will have to say, if you've never been on Royal Caribbean, go. Definitely a great cruise line, great experience, awesome boat. We were on Symphony of the Seas. We went to Cozumel. We went to Nassau, Bahamas. Then we went to Coco Cay, which is in the Bahamas also, and it's Royal Caribbean's kind of private island. And it was phenomenal. It was a great trip. Girls had a great time. We had a great time. All of the above. So we are back now, back in full swing, back in our normal kind of schedule. Yeah, I'm on the road with you again today. So if you hear some road noise, if you're listening to audio, that's why. If you're watching, you know I'm on the road. But something that I wanted to tell you guys, because we're excited to do this. Coming very soon, I will introduce you, for those of you that don't know her, I'll be introducing you to my partner in crime, my business partner, my partner in life, my beautiful wife, Laura. She's going to join us on the podcast, and we just want to introduce that element. So many of you that know us know her, and she's incredible. And she has, unique insights, background on her. She came from corporate. She was corporate for a large healthcare company, and she brought that kind of systems and processes and critical thinking over from corporate to Speak Loud Group and Amplified Equity. And it was just something that an area that I am not as strong in, that she is. And so we're very complementary of each other. We work very well together. Historically, even before our business, she would work from home, I would work from home. And we always talked shop, if you will, just about what things I was going and dealing with and working on, things she was working on and dealing with. And so we've always had a great relationship that way. Some people were like, man, working with your spouse, I don't know. And we do it very well. And so we want to share some insight from that. For those of you that either maybe are considering working with your spouse or currently work with your spouse or would like to work with your spouse, we just feel like there may be some context there. And we may go even deeper than just the business side. There may be some personal and, of course, raising two kids and, things like that. There's just context there that we think would be helpful and beneficial, and something that, people could take some nuggets from, as we have taken nuggets from others that have done it before us or have put things out there about it. So that being said, fast forward all of that, we're through with all of that. Today I want to talk to you about something that is very near and dear to my heart, in terms of in the business world. We're not going to talk about marketing or advertising today. We're talking more about our kind of amplified equity side, which is our growth, coaching, and consulting piece of our business that is new this year. And same thing as if we're talking about marketing or advertising or campaigns or just business growth or systems operations, whatever it may be. I am typically always bringing something forward that has happened recently, whether it is in our business, it is consulting for another business, it's maybe a talk I gave. Again, I never really bring anything forward that has not been tried and tested. I typically do not bring you theories or ideas that have not been kind of tested and put through the ringer of, does this work, does it not work? And if I do, again, my caveat is I will always let you know that, hey, this is something we're hearing or seeing and we have kind of a thought, and here's what it is. But today, this is something that has been tried and tested. So historic context, as some of you know, some of you don't know, I spent years of my life in construction management. Some of it was as an employee, some of it was as a consultant, and I have always had this knack for kind of seeing the nuts and bolts of things and really getting things down to a certain point to where like you see a high level problem, but then you get to the nuts and bolts of it and you realize maybe the problem or the constraint or the obstacle roadblock wasn't exactly what you thought in the beginning. It wound up being maybe several things, or maybe one small thing that you were blowing out of proportion, or you really felt like, where you eventually saw the issue or the leak or the stoppage or whatever it may be, that was just the end of it. It didn't actually stem from there. It stemmed from sales, and then it affected production, and you were seeing it in production, whatever it may be. So that's my background, my context, as my job was to always come in and to essentially see those things from a 30,000 foot view and then pick them apart and figure out what needed to be tweaked or changed or implemented, and then bring that to life. And that's what we're doing inside of Amplified Equity, is we're trying to see things as an outsider, without the kind of tainted lenses of ownership or leadership. We're trying to look at things as a total picture of where is the problem or constraints or obstacles, where are they actually at that are limiting a business or holding a business back, and how do we correct those and fix those. So today I want to talk to you about a recent consultative call that we had. Someone wanted to hire us to kind of look at their sales process. They were essentially stagnant. They were doing a good number in terms of sales for their business. They were not seeing growth though. They were continually adding salespeople, but they felt like that in theory should increase their sales revenue. But what wound up happening was they kept plateauing. They would add one or two. They had gotten as high as adding 3 new sales reps in a year, and they just weren't seeing the increase. You would think that, like, if we're doing $5 million a year and each sales rep, we have 5 of them, they each account for about $1 million a year. If we add 3 new reps, and even if they only do half of what they did, that should be additional 1.5 in revenue. But what they were seeing is they were adding 2 or 3 people, and essentially the sales, they might see a small spike, but then they would see it go back down, and they were staying kind of stagnant at that number. And they had done this for, I think it was 2 or 3 years is what they had told me, is they had added, and they would go up a little bit, but then they would see it come back down. And they were just really scratching their head and trying to figure out, why are we not seeing the increase? So we came in and started picking things apart and trying to decide, in our heads, same theory, right? If I add salespeople, I should see that number go up. These were heavily commission based sales representatives. They did have a base. So when we look at everything from 30,000 foot view, is they did have an increased cost by bringing on new sales reps because they had a base. But the large portion of that was going to be a commission base that had a big upside potential, a high earning potential for these sales reps. Their compensation plan was not bad. We did look that over because we started thinking through that process as well. It's like, maybe your sales reps can't ever reach this like number you're throwing out there of what they could make, but it was very obtainable. They were not misrepresenting the position. They were doing a great job there. Their sales staff. One of the first things we recommended after the initial consultation was that we run some DISC assessments. We do some personality assessments to determine, are these the right people in the right seats? And, everything there. They had one rep that we had a little bit of a question mark on. We had them retake the DISC assessment, actually a different version of the DISC assessment. It kind of reaffirmed that they were a good fit for that position. So all of those things checked a box. Those are like the low-hanging fruit that we can typically look at and go, okay, you just don't have great, strong salespeople in this role, or your compensation structure is bad, and so they're not like incentivized to do anything beyond kind of average. Those are 2 easy things that we can typically come in and tweak compensation plan, or help them find some of the right people, really give them a good profile, help them write the copy for the hiring ad. But that just wasn't the case here. So we started digging a little deeper of like, Let's look historically. They didn't have churn. Let's talk about that as well. If you are adding salespeople, are you adding people to add, or are you adding people because some of your top performers or mid-level performers are leaving? That can be a big red flag as well. We've got to figure out why that is happening. None of that was happening. These people, they had a great sales team. Their oldest one had been with them close to 10 years. Their newest ones now at this point had been with them 6 months to a year, and they're just, again, banging their head against a wall trying to figure out, and they're just continuing to move forward. And at a certain point, as the owner, you don't have the time to sit back and dissect these things. You just keep moving forward. And it's not like they were hurting. The business was doing fine. The owner was making good money. All the leadership was doing well. Like, it was an established business that they could probably turn around and sell for a significant amount of money. But they wanted to know why, and they needed someone kind of from the outside that had the time and the energy and the expertise to really pick that thing apart. So let's fast forward to what we found and then what we suggested that they implement. So what wound up happening was, you go early on to like their earliest salespeople. These people were eat what you kill. And those of you that are not in the sales world or do not know what that means, that it means essentially is that they were guerrilla marketing. They were knocking on doors. They were shaking hands. They were going to networking meetings. They were asking for referrals. They were building a book of business. These sales reps were required because there was no lead flow. The business did not have a name or reputation behind it. It was quite literally, they were grinding every single day. These rock stars came in there and helped them grow their business. And so they were the foundation of this sales process. You fast forward, a couple of years down the road, the company, the brand, has now built some level of reputation. There is some lead flow. People are now calling them organically. So-and-so used them and worked with them, and so now they're calling them because they have a mutual friend or connection or associate or colleague. And then so there started to be this kind of increase in call volume, web traffic, lead form submits. And so now some of these sales reps are getting fed some of these leads. And so they continue to kind of see this climb, because initially they have their base sales reps that I think that in this time period, you fast forward a couple of years, they have brought on like one or two more, because again, now they have lead volume, and we can say that in our ads, we'll provide you, some level of yada, yada, yada. And everything's going well. Like, there's no issues, no problems. But also metrics were not exactly being tracked. This lead came in from here versus the sales rep generated this lead, or it was a referral from they just weren't doing a whole lot of tracking. In the early stages, if you don't have the systems, you don't have the process, you don't have really the manpower to track those things, then you're just not as worried about them, because you see revenue going up, you see profit going up, everybody's happy. It's like, do we really need to know where every little thing came from? The answer is yes, but in that time, we see it time and time again. In any shape or size or industry, like, it just happens. You're just not as concerned with the nuances of the data at that point. Those of you that are, good job. You'll appreciate it when you fast forward, when you get down the road a little bit. So let's keep progressing. Brand continues to grow. We're fast forwarding another couple of years. The brand continues to grow. The reputation continues to grow. They've added an additional one or two sales reps. They start to see the kind of stagnation of their revenue. They start to see that we're seeing more calls coming in organically. We're seeing more website traffic, inquiries. We're still seeing good referrals, things like that. But they're starting to see a small decline in the growth projections, or what they're seeing year over year. So they kind of, the head scratching starts a little bit, but their answer to this was, we're going to double down on kind of marketing and advertising. We are going to start, they hired an agency, not ours. They hired another agency to start running, and they threw the gamut at it. They're like, we want SEO, we want pay-per-click on Google, we want meta ads, we want essentially everything that we can get, because in their thought process, and it wasn't necessarily the wrong thought process, is like, let's increase lead flow and get these sales reps. Our sales reps can close. We know they're pretty good. So let's just simply increase lead flow, and then that in theory should increase our revenue. And they weren't wrong. They weren't wrong. In theory, it should. And then they're just the way that, again, when you go back to tracking and really pulling this thing apart, that's what it took us time to do, is really finding out the story from like where they were, how they got started to where they are now. We had to do all of that kind of investigative work to determine like where were the changes along the line that have led you to where you are right now and causing whatever this issue is. So we're like, okay, let's keep moving forward. And we started looking at when they had better data at this point in terms of like, we started asking them, because now they're spending money. They're spending money on paid ads. And so they started tracking a little bit better and they had reporting. So we started looking, we asked for access to their Google ads, their meta ads. And we started just pulling some historic data. And we're like, okay, you generated this many leads, and then like, okay, now we're looking at referrals. At this point, they had a CRM system where they, each sales rep could kind of enter their referrals or their leads that they were generating versus the ones that kind of came in through the office or through the paid ad campaigns. Excuse me. And what we started to notice is there was this trigger almost like to the date, is that as these leads started coming in from these paid ad campaigns, and really before that a little bit, you could definitely see like as the brand, you saw the brand growth because you started seeing more of these organic calls, the website traffic started going up. The thing that almost coincided with it was the referrals and the self-generated business from the sales reps declined. And so we started noticing that. We kind of put a pin in it at first because we noticed it initially. So we're 3 to 5 years down the road now, go back to about the year 3 mark. That's where you started seeing the brand had this reputation that was growing. You had a couple of additional sales reps, more calls were coming in organically. And so those leads were being fed to these sales reps. And then they weren't generating as much on their own. They stopped doing some of the networking. They stopped doing a lot of the, asking for, next step referrals. They stopped doing some of those things. Why? Because they were being fed. In a lot of cases, and this is not a blanket statement, you guys know that I'm very careful because it's not always, I don't want anyone to be like, you said that all sales reps. No. In most cases, some of your highest performing sales reps, when you start feeding them, they get fat and lazy. And I don't mean that physically, can be, but I mean it like in terms of what they used to have to do. They used to go out and they would eat what they killed. That is what they were the best at. They were natural born hunters, and they loved that chase of being able to go from I have nothing today, and then by the end of the week, I closed 3 to 5 deals. This was how much I made off of that. Like there's a level, there's like an endorphin release for these types of people that it is their jam. It is what they nerd out on, is being able to do that, to connect those dots and put those pieces together. So you fast forward to where they were, and it was like, they just had to respond. They became more of like order takers than they were like these killer salespeople. And because of that, their criteria for finding new salespeople, and then also how those salespeople were trained, it just became very, very different. Is now they weren't looking for or trying to find or training people to be like these like rock star salespeople. They were training them to be like, hey, you're going to come in on Monday and you're going to have leads waiting on you, and then Tuesday you're going to have new leads waiting on you. And they weren't trained and taught how to like be these actual like sales professionals, to like, here's how you follow up with them, here's how you ask them for referrals, and then you also are going to be attending this networking event, and you're also going to be doing this presentation, and you're also responsible for X, Y, or Z number of referrals or self-gens or whatever it may be. Not only that, they weren't tracking it any differently. Like we had the numbers from meta ads of like, hey, you generated these leads, and here's John Smith, and John Smith went to Bob, and then Bob, like they had it to a certain degree, but not like all of the way. I couldn't look at Bob as a sales rep and go, how many did he close off? Like they didn't have all of the data there. They had enough of it that we were able to connect the dots. So fast forward now is like, we have found this connection point of why you are potentially seeing, so like they were spending more money to generate leads because now they're doing paid ads. The self-gen, which essentially doesn't cost you anything outside of what you're already paying your sales rep because they're doing it on their own. You did not have any additional expense in terms of like ad spend. So that's why you saw this, like you'd start to see this uptick, but then you would see a level out because they would get comfortable and they're like, there's an added expense for this lead. This lead that was technically free kind of went away. So there was this, like, it kept balancing itself out because they were not generating anything on their own. And this is not the case in every business. This is the case in this specific business, is that they essentially got lazy. And there was not ever a plan put in place of like, you still need to generate some of this on your own. You should be able to turn one lead into 2 leads or 2 leads into 6 leads. Like, you should be able to ask for referrals and connections, and you should be able to go out and still network and meet new people and visit offices and introduce yourself or drop off a card. Like, you should still be doing those things, but they got so used to, I just have leads. And there was kind of a 2-prong answer or a twofold solution that was there. Is like, in theory, if your sales rep is so busy running the paid ad leads, does he have time to then go and self-gen and network and do those types of things? That was the case for some of their sales reps. Some of their top performers were so kind of inundated with running these paid ad leads that they weren't able to self-gen some of their own. So long story short is, we gave them a couple of options, and that was kind of context. It was kind of part of one of them, is that you need to, if you're going to hire new sales reps, I am not real keen on giving brand new sales reps free leads. Like, we are paying all this money to generate these leads and and you haven't really proven yourself, and we're essentially paying you to go close these leads, but you're not generating anything on your own. And this is very specific to their business. I think certain businesses would be perfectly fine doing that. If the revenue is there, if the ROI is there, then like, have at it. But we proposed to them, we said, look, here's how we would build this out. Is we would build this out as, you're going to still provide some level of leads. You're paying for them. You're not necessarily going to turn that machine off. But as you're adding some of these new sales reps, it's going to go in a certain kind of, not really a round robin approach, which means like, if Bob got one, then Trevor gets one, and then Bob gets another one, and then Trevor gets the next one, like goes back and forth or around the circle. Is we were going to still account for, like, there was a measure of, you've been here the longest, you have a proven track record, you've kind of earned this, but we still need to build out a system in a way to where like your top performers can still self-gen. Because at a certain point, you're saying they're not capped in their earning potential, but they really are. They really are capped in their earning potential, because if they can only run so many leads a day, then they're capped. So if they've hit that point, then that really is their capped out earning potential. And if you want to make a way to where they can make more money, you've got to tweak some of these things. So long story short, we mapped all this out, and we looked at like 5 different directions that they could possibly go, ultimately kind of landing on, as number 1, we wanted to implement a structure to where they were more incentivized to close things that they self-generated. That they were still incentivized to go out and get new business. Because when we looked at it, at the end of the day, you have this lead from Meta or Google that you're paying for. So there is a cost associated with that lead. If Bob, top sales rep, or any sales rep, generated one of those on his own from a referral or going out and visiting an office or doing networking or whatever it may be, there was in theory a cost savings because we did not have to pay Google or Meta for that lead. Why not kick that kind of back to the sales rep? So what we essentially wind up coming up with, and we drew it out on paper, is that we are going to add an extra percentage, not one, it was multiple, but an extra percentage to any self-generated business. And it was actually a significant percentage, because if it was like, depending on their structure and how much that percent is worth. But in this case, if it was 1 or 3%, like, that doesn't really get them excited, doesn't really make them want to go do those things. But if it was 10%, or 20%, then they're like, oh, wow. Like, okay, I mean, almost immediately, if I could add 5 self-gens a month, like I might make an extra $10,000 this month. So we implemented that, is we wrote that out, and we mapped it out. Again, when we're rewriting commission structures or anything like that, we mapped the thing out from start to finish. It was like, what is the cap of this? What is the potential of this? What is the possible harm to the company, to the rep? What does that look like? And so in this case, all we were doing was layering that in. So now it's like, hey, those of you that were already doing self-gens, they just became a whole lot more valuable. And those of you that weren't doing self-gens, now you're thinking about doing self-gens. So we kept the commission structure the same. That was our concern in terms of like paid ad leads. Anytime you go in and start like tweaking or changing that, that could be an issue. Is like we don't know that we want to mess. Then you're messing with their money, and you run the risk of like you're going to lose those people. We've done it before. We've written it up in certain ways to where it can still work. But in this case, we were like, you know what? We don't want to mess with a good thing. Their commission structure was good. Sales reps were pretty happy with it, and we just didn't have to mess with something that was already working very well. So that was the biggest change that we made, is that we wanted to make it to where they were incentivized for doing self-gen. And so that small change is, you fast forward, this call was, the initial call that we had with them was 3 months ago. The kind of this deep dive, it took us 6 or 8 weeks to kind of go through it. And then we implemented it. We gave them our plan, our blueprint. They implemented it. You fast forward, it was 30 days that we had kind of the first check-in with them. And at 30 days, they had already seen like a 10%, it was between 10 and 15%. It's probably, I think it was roughly 12% increase in self-generated flow. So it was a small tweak, but if you take that and you and I think it's going to be much higher than that. You go through an entire year of that, I think it's going to be much higher. But even in that short period of time, it was already, let's say 10%. 10% based on their revenue that they're doing right now, that could be an additional $1 million in revenue. Just that one small tweak. And these are the things that like I really nerd out on when it comes to our amplified equity side, because it's small levers. We look at these things, and we do it in our business. You probably do it in your business, is that we see these massive issues, these massive problems, and we just like, we look at the undertaking and like what it would take to tweak and change, and oh my gosh, the whole business has to change and all that. It's usually not. It's usually minor adjustments. It's usually little things. It's small levers that get pulled and moved, and then it winds up dramatically changing the business. Like there's huge upside potential in some of these very, very small levers that get moved. And so for them, and there's actually 3 or 4 more things that we wound up doing with them in terms of this structure. They had a couple of, some people are really incentivized by commissions. Some people are really incentivized by contest, and we're talking about sales specifically. You have some of them that are more incentivized by time. They want to be able to do something with their family, but they're worried about like, I'm going to take off and not have my commissions and things like that. That was one thing that we worked on with them as well, is like, how do you incentivize them for like a sales blitz or something like that? Because you do something blanket, and they were noticing that like half of their sales staff was really in, and you saw the positive movement from them, and then half of their sales staff was not really interested. So we got creative, and we helped them come up with a few ways that they could run some incentives and some contests that kind of incentivized the entire team instead of just a couple of people out of the team. But again, this was just a small tweak, is like they were already being asked to do self-generation. They were already being asked to go to networking meetings, things like that, but they were also being like fed these paid leads. And so because of that, they were making enough money where they were comfortable, they were happy, their sales commissions looked good. They weren't being urged. There was no urgency for them at all to do any type of self-generated thing. So by us making the small tweak of like, hey, number one, those paid ad leads, like the way they're going to be distributed, we're going to change that just a little bit. Again, we were not trying to negatively affect any of these salespeople because they have a good staff. They did not want to lose anybody. So we had to get a little creative. If I was going to be more aggressive, there was probably a couple of more things that I would have done there. But because they were trying to protect the integrity of their sales team, they did not want to lose anybody. And that's not the case. Sometimes we're walking in and ownership, leadership is like, we do not care. If we lose these 3 to 5 people, like we don't care. We've got to change this stuff. Cool. Then we can be a little more aggressive. In this case, we were trying to be, we're trying to make the changes we can make to impact the bottom line the way we needed to, but also protect the integrity of the sales team. So really not lose anybody because they were very happy with their sales team and they did not want to have to rebuild or replace or whatever it may be. So we made a small tweak kind of how the rotation of the paid ads were going to come in. We did not ding them or dock them for the commissions on those at all. The small adjustment we made is we're going to create a higher incentive for you to bring in self-generated. And again, in 30 days, it was 12% increase that they saw. And it's like these small things, again, they're just small levers. They're not huge, massive things. I'll share with you more about what we did with this company because it wound up going beyond their sales team, and there's actually more that we did on the sales side as well. We tweaked some presentation stuff as well, and then we got over into some operations things, but we'll talk about that more in another one because you guys know I try to keep these 30 minutes or less. But again, that's what I want you to take from this is like, it's not always massive, major shifts or changes or complete restructures or anything like that. It can be, but a lot of times it's very small adjustments. If you were to take this down to its rawest or easiest form, like forget that we did anything with the paid ads and just that we incentivized the self-gen because we knew that we're paying for ads over here. If we take that cost away, then what about self-gen? There's an extra percentage that is available there that we would normally be paying out in paid ads that we can just pay it back to the sales rep who spent the time and energy to go and get that lead and then cultivate that and build that relationship and then close it and then turn it into business. Like, let's just incentivize them for that. And it was a small tweak, small adjustment that made a 10% difference in their business. And again, I think that when we look 12 months from now, I think it'll be higher than 10 or 12%, but we'll see. But even at that, I want to go in what we've already seen, 10%. The company's doing $10 to $12 million a year. That's $1 million in revenue. And the profit margins are good, which is like, again, we had the movement in the commission that we could pay them. It's $1 million. $1 million in revenue by making one small adjustment. So I hope this is helpful. Again, I love just talking through things that we've seen, things that we've worked on. It's fun to be able to share because it's things that I know that all of you could go then and like, if it's simplifying a problem in your business, you could learn that from this podcast. If you have a sales staff that you're trying to figure out how do I incentivize them to do self-gens, well, that's a possibility. Again, if your margins are right, then you could do something along this lines. There's all the things lined up. But I hope this was helpful. Guys, we will see you on the next one. Have a great rest of your week. And again, I'm excited to bring Laura on. We're going to talk about business and relationship and all that kind of fun stuff. See you on the next one.